Hey Sunny Hill, it's Harry here, and I'm leading through the Take Fives this week. And today we're kind of jumping straight into Acts 14, picking up on where we were left on the story, where Jake left it on Acts 13 a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, I was kind of really looking at this Acts 14 when I read through it. There were so many things that stood out, and it's a really interesting chapter because what we kind of find ourselves in is we're looking at Paul and Barnabas as they're kind of going about their mission, kind of their church planting. They're travelling all across the Mediterranean, and they're being pursued by these rabble, this group of Jews who really just not liking what they're saying, not liking what they're sharing about Jesus, and they're just after them. They're just after to get after them. And so we've kind of found them now. They've gone to this place called Lystra, this city where these Jews are now pursued them to there, and they've kind of dragged Paul out of the city itself. I don't really know how Barnabas got out of that, but he did a quick one by getting away. But Paul wasn't so lucky. He got dragged out by these Jews, and he was stoned. He got absolutely smashed. And to be honest, you would think that would be enough to kind of put you off going back into that city to share about actually what Jesus had done. But not Paul. He just wasn't that guy, was he? And so where we see him now, he's been left for dead. But shockingly, once he kind of recovers, he goes back into Lystra. He goes straight back in there, and he's telling the believers. It says here in verse 22, it's through hardships that we must enter the kingdom of God. Now, that perseverance here, that perseverance that Paul demonstrates, isn't just bravado at all. It's a quiet faithfulness, even though there's pain. It kind of reminds me of, a walk that I once did with my wife in the mountains in Wales. It was actually the mountain where I proposed to her at the top. But at the time, she didn't know that. And it was hard work. It was a hard graft. We were kind of going up this mountain and the routes were hard. Didn't really know which way I wanted to go because I could see that she was struggling a bit and she wanted to go a different way, so I was making all these accommodations. But then on the way back down, she was just desperate to get back. I'd done the proposal at the top and everything was great, but that joy was slowly disappearing because she was just ready to be back down at the bottom. And we got to a point where the roads forked out and I was just unsure actually which route we should take. I looked at the map and I couldn't see which path that we were supposed to take. So I decided that what I'd do is I'd run down each of those paths down this mountain, see which direction they were kind of leading to, and then run all the way back up. And that wasn't easy, that was hard going. So I kind of ran off, left her there, and I hadn't planned for it. When I was planning the route on that walk, I wasn't planning that I was going to be having to do that. But maps never promise it'll be easy anyway. You kind of look at routes and you think, yeah, that's going to be good. But it often doesn't actually end up that way. But it's not only that, the trail that we've managed to find, actually it did lead to somewhere good. And that's so true of what's happening in this passage too, isn't it? That actually the trails actually lead somewhere worth going. And that perseverance, in the sense that I was talking about, it isn't pretending that hike wasn't going to hurt or it wasn't going to throw any curveballs. It was about choosing to keep moving, even though it was hard, even though there was hardships. And that's exactly what Paul was talking about, but in a physical and spiritual sense, And so, yeah, my kind of thoughts to kind of wrap it up really, and thinking about Paul and Barnabas and this part of the passage in Acts 14, it just really shows us that hardships, whatever we face in our life, and particularly for our faith, all those setbacks, they don't mean that God stepped away. I think it's really important that we kind of pause on that. Like, actually, when things are hard, it's not that God stepped away, but it is just part of the journey. And for all of us, whatever we face, in life, whether it's failures or pain or rejection, perseverance is trusting that God is still at work. And so all we've got to do is take that next faithful step. And so I want to leave you with that thought today, is actually, what hardships are we facing? And how are we listening, how are we interpreting that word from God, where Paul is telling the believers that actually it's through hardships that we must enter the kingdom of God. So what hardships are we facing today? What are you facing today that actually you need to be able to take that faithful next step into? And I just encourage you to pray into that this morning if you know that there's going to be something hard that you're going to be facing today. But just remember that God is with you in that God is present in that, and that you're not walking this step alone. And I'll catch you tomorrow for the next chapter.